Please open your Bibles and you can follow along with the scripture reading. This morning's scripture reading is from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 2, verses 1 to 16. Matthew, chapter 2, verses 1 to 16. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of King Herod, wise men from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he who has been born King of Jews? For we saw his star at its rising and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was deeply disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. So he assembled all the chief priests and scribes of the people and asked them where the Christ would be born. "In Bethlehem of Judea," they told him, "because this is what was written by the prophet. And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, because out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod secretly summoned the wise men and asked them the exact time the star appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. When you find him, report back to me, so that I too can go and worship him." After hearing the king, they went on their way. And there it was, the star they had seen at its rising. It led them until it came and stopped above the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overwhelmed with joy. Entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and falling to their knees, they worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their own country by another route. After they were gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, "Get up, take the child and his mother, flee to Egypt, and stay there until I tell you. For Herod is about to search for the child to kill him." So he got up, took the child and his mother during the night, and escaped to Egypt. He stayed there until Herod's death, so that what was spoken by the Lord through the prophet might be fulfilled. "Out of Egypt I called my son." Then Herod, when he realized that he had been outwitted by the wise men, flew into a rage. He gave orders to massacre all the boys in and around Bethlehem who were 2 years old and under, in keeping with the time he had learned from the wise men. This is the word of the Lord.
Good morning. Good morning. I am not the normal pastor here this morning, am I? My name is Wyley Jenkins. I'm pastor of the Evangelical Church of Aldana in the United Arab Emirates. So we are a church plant out of the Evangelical Community Church in Abu Dhabi, where I was pastor. Before that, I was pastor of International Church in Madrid, Spain. I've served as a missionary around the world in different places. I'm married, and I have 3 teenage children, so you can pray for me, all right? And very glad to be here. I brought my friend Andy with me this morning. He's traveled all this way. So we've been up since about your 1 a.m. this morning. So it feels like a long day. It's going to be a long day. But very glad to be here with you this morning. Let me just begin by greeting you from our church. So the Church of the United Arab Emirates is very much in love with believers all around the world, but particularly want to wish you our greetings and want to say we're excited. You may not be aware of this, but every Sunday you are prayed for probably by somebody somewhere, right? But particularly our church, you're on a list of churches we pray for every Sunday. So you may not know that, but it's a pleasure to actually be here in person after praying for you. So let me begin, speaking of prayer, by just turning to the Lord. I do this as I do always before I begin a sermon. Father, I just come before you right now. Lord, I ask you to do what men cannot do, what words cannot do, what persuasive words cannot do, what eloquence cannot do. I ask you to do the work of the Spirit. You say that it's better that you leave because you're going to send your Spirit. Teach us to trust in you and not in the words of men. Show us your glory in this beautiful passage. May we be changed. May we be lifted up. May we be transformed. May we be convicted, Lord. May we be brought closer to you, trust in you, and worship you in a greater way by hearing your word today. We pray for you to do these things in Jesus' mighty name. Amen. I converted from atheism in college, so I was a very kind of radical, anti-Christian kind of guy. So I converted from atheism to Christianity. And after doing that, I was just the guy who talked about Jesus all the time. If you've ever known anybody like that, I just talked about him to all my friends everywhere I went. I worked in a warehouse while I was in college. And one of the things, I would get in conversations with people, and you'd get these very interesting responses. And I'll never forget, I was having this conversation with a man one time. We were talking about Moses. And as we began to discuss, he said, yeah, I really feel bad for Moses. He had that one guy who really resisted him. And I said, who, Pharaoh? No, the guy who was like a foreman, and he really resisted him. He helped build the golden calf. I'm thinking, I've read the Bible. I don't remember this story, you know. So I go home later, and about an hour later, I'm thinking about this, and it occurs to me, he's referring to this man that appears in a movie with Charlton Heston called The Ten Commandments, right? So he's totally mixed up what the Bible talks about, what it says about, with what popular culture says. And we giggle, right? But you and I wouldn't do that, would we? We wouldn't fall into those traps, right? I think if there's a story in the Bible that gets brought into popular culture and shown in photographs and a nativity and mixed up, and quite often we don't understand, it's the story of baby Jesus. And even the story, you may not be aware of this, even the story as it appears in the Bible never matches the nativity scene. I'm sorry if this ruins anybody's Christmas, I apologize. They don't match. We're going to see today the story of the wise men, or the Magi, and the Mad King. I want to do three things. I have three goals with this passage this morning. Goals. Here's what I'm wanting to do. I want you to take a fresh look. I want you to take a fresh look at a story you probably heard again and again and again. Another thing is I want you to see what Matthew, the gospel writer, wants you to see. In the book of Matthew, he is exalting Jesus as king. From chapter 1, he begins with a genealogy that shows that Jesus is the promised son of David. He immediately begins, and when Jesus' mother Mary is pregnant as a virgin, and he comes and speaks to Joseph, he says, Joseph, son of David. And there's this emphasis on Jesus as a king, a son of king, going to be born to be a king. He'll be king over his people. And you're going to see this again and again. And here in this passage, it's not going to change. The Jesus we're going to see, even as a baby, is a threat to the king of his time. Why? Because he's a king. And so Matthew's lifting him up, okay? That's another goal. I want you to see Jesus as king. And lastly, what this passage is going to be doing is not just telling us Jesus is king, but showing us reactions to that. Jesus as king evokes, it inspires reaction. The Magi, the wise men, are going to come and they're going to worship Jesus, but Herod is going to try and conspire against him. The Magi are going to finally reach Jesus, and they will give him their gifts and worship him. Herod will try and murder. And so back and forth, the story is telling us someone wanting to worship and someone wanting to kill him. And it's back and forth. This is what Jesus the King does. This is the story of a baby born in a manger. So let's just take it like scenes in a movie. The first scene is the arrival of the Magi. Arrival of the Magi, verses 1 and 2. I'm just going to read them to you and explain them. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of King Herod, wise men from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star in its rising and have come to worship him." First of all, I want you to notice, unlike the Nativity, it says very clearly, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, these men show up. It's not that Jesus is being born at the very moment they're riding up on camels, okay? It's not happening. Matter of fact, the word that's going to be used in a moment is child, not baby. Jesus is older. Could be anywhere up to a year old by the time this is happening, okay? So this could be later, could be sooner. It's hard to know exactly. But just to say he's not an infant wrapped up in the manger. As a matter of fact, you're going to see in a moment they arrive at a house, not a manger. So you're going to see Jesus is already born. The second is you're going to see that there's this man that appears called King Herod. Now, Herod is very famous. He's not famous for many good things. Herod was born in 73 A.D. He died somewhere around 4 to 1. There's debate about when it is before B.C., right? He dies. So Jesus, you're looking at me going, huh? I thought Jesus was born in 0. No, probably not. Probably not born in 0. Probably born a few years before that because of the birth of Jesus and the death of Herod coinciding. And so you begin to see this. Who is Herod? Well, Herod is famous for several things. If you're familiar with the temple in the time of Jesus, it's this magnificent structure, right? Built by people. It's amazing, right? The original temple had certain pieces. God had told Moses, I want you to do this. Solomon picks it up. He rebuilds it. He does everything like that, and he adds a little bit. But by the time Herod comes along, he really wants to gain favor. You see, Herod is not a Jew by birth. He's from Edom. His parents convert to Judaism, and he really wants to win the Jewish people over because they don't like him very much. So he decides, what am I going to do? What does a good politician do? I'm going to do something for the people, something they like. So he builds the temple up, and he builds it in a magnificent way. He wins battles, and he does several good things, and he is king. But by the time this story comes along, Herod had begun to get a very bad reputation. Why is that? Herod had actually killed his favorite wife and 2 of his oldest sons a few years before this happens. This caused Caesar Augustus in the time to say of Herod, it's better to be a pig than a son in the house of Herod because Jews don't kill pigs. So imagine. He's the mad king. Mad not in angry, mad in crazy. Okay. At this point in his life, he's showing mental instability, right? He's not well. And this is the man that they're coming to meet. And who is it that's coming? It says, wise men from the east arrived in Jerusalem. Wise men from the east. The Greek word used here, the word used here is not Greek. If you know anything about the languages of the Bible, the New Testament is written in Greek. But the word that appears here, Magi, is not a Greek word. It is a Persian word. It's a borrowed word. It's translated here, wise men. Now, why would you use a word from another language? It's because you're trying to describe a concept of a person. It's really hard to exactly nail down in English. There's not a word that really greatly translates it. You may have sung the song, We Three Kings of Orient Are, and you get this idea that they're coming up with their crowns on, right? The Bible calls them wise men here, right? And so these guys really weren't anything like a king or sheik, right? And a monarch from Europe or some sheik here in these parts of the world. Nor was he from Oxford or Cambridge and the wise man type scholar. Not that. Get those things out of your mind. We actually know what the Magi are. You know how we know what the Magi are? Because they reappear. They appear in an earlier part of the Bible. Do you know who was known as Magi? Daniel. In the book of Daniel, Daniel was a wise man in Babylon. And actually, there's one part in Daniel where he says in Daniel 2:24, do not kill the wise man of the king. Wise men of the king. He's a Magi. So think about Daniel. Was he a ruler like a king? Yeah, he ruled. He did government type things, didn't he? But what else did he do? He gave counsel to the king. He helped organize. He was a wise man. He even interpreted dreams. Are you seeing how the wise men fall into this category? So they're from somewhere, Babylon, maybe Persia. The word had spread around. This word Magi had spread around, so it's really difficult to know exactly where they were from. But let's just assume the closest place, okay? The closest place to that would have been Babylon. And I want you to think with me about Babylon. Babylon is not around the corner. Babylon is 1,300 kilometers distance from Bethlehem. So these guys got on a camel, most likely. How many kilometers can you go on a camel per day? Somebody says, I don't know. I've never taken mine out to check, right? The average is about 32 kilometers a day. So that would put them somewhere around 40 days in a one-way trip from Babylon to here. And not just any one-way trip. You're crossing places where there's no Roman to protect you. There's no government around you. So more than likely, these men, and by the way, it never says there were 3 of them. Never. Sorry. Never says there were 3. We're almost positive there was a whole entire group of people. You know why? No one traveled carrying gold, boxes of gold, without soldiers and servants. These guys probably had a whole entourage of people traveling with them. You with me? So get in your mind the actual picture the Bible is laying out for you. These very respected, very knowledgeable wise men begin to come from the east. They're looking for someone very specific. What did they say? Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? Not where is the one who one day when he grows up will be the King of the Jews. Can you imagine the terror in the heart of a current king? When you come up to him and say, hey, where's the king? The one that was just born. He's thinking, I'm the king. What a question, right? Where is he who was born King of the Jews? And they explain why. For we saw his star at its rising, and we've come to worship him. We saw his star at its rising, and we've come to worship him. Now, how would they have known anything about a star? Well, if you know your Israelite history, Israel was taken into captivity in Babylon. Later they move on to Persia. What did they bring with them to Babylon and Persia? Scrolls of the Old Testament. And in these scrolls of the Old Testament, there's a prophecy. And what does the prophecy say? Coming from the book of Numbers. Chapter 24:17, it says this, I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel. So they see this parallel between a star rising and a king being born. That's what the prophecy is referring to. Numbers 24:17. So most likely they had heard this. They probably heard Jewish people speaking of this, and they study the stars. That's part of their job as the wise men that they were. And when they see this, they come. They come to to Jerusalem, looking for a king. That leads us to the next set of verses. In verse 3, he says this, when King Herod heard this, he was deeply disturbed. Why would he be deeply disturbed? Well, I just said it's a king wanting to replace them. But here's the thing. We have come to worship him, is what they just said. Can you imagine? Born king, we've come to worship, and he's deeply disturbed. And it says, all Jerusalem with him. Now, you may be thinking to me, why would Jerusalem be disturbed? Or hadn't they been waiting for the Messiah? Hadn't they been desiring for this king to be born? Why would they be disturbed? I don't know about you, but I grew up in a house. My dad was a bull rider. He was a college basketball player. He was a really rough and tough kind of guy. And when my dad got upset, the rest of us in the house, it didn't matter what it was about, right? But when Dad got upset, we were all, okay, I'm upset. I'm disturbed. Because when he gets upset, everybody's in trouble. And it's the same sort of way that's happening with King Herod. He's already killed his wife. He's already killed some of his best friends. He killed 2 of his sons. What is he going to do if he thinks there's a king out against him? You with me? So they're disturbed because this is going to cause them problems. I want you to I'm going to give some application, really talk to you, preach at you a little bit at the end, but I just want to say this here because I'm not really going to pick up this theme later. I want you to notice, though Herod is antagonistic, he's anti-Jesus. He's not wanting this baby that's being born at all. Though Herod is antagonistic, the people are indifferent. They don't care. They're willing to tell them. Can you imagine pastors being willing to tell you where you can go kill the Messiah baby? This is what's happening. They're actually giving him the very information he needs to know how to persecute Jesus. They're indifferent. They would rather seek their own comfort and what's easier for them. This is what we get when we get these men. So it says that they assembled all of the chief priests and the scribes, and asked them where the Messiah would be born. In Bethlehem of Judea, they told him, because this is what was written by the prophet. By the way, if you ever hear every theologian, it says here all. Did you catch that? All the scribes, all these wise men these are the Jewish version of the wise men, the chief priest and the scribes. When every theologian agrees on something, you better believe that's what's probably true, right? Because they usually don't agree. And so here we see them agreeing. It's in Bethlehem. In verse 6, he actually quotes the passage that we read in the confession time. And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. Now you'll notice, you may pick up that it exchanges in the land of Judah for the word Ephrathah. Do you know there were two Bethlehems in Israel? There's Bethlehem in Galilee and there's Bethlehem in Judea. So if you're clarifying to a king like Herod who didn't grow up, you'd probably say, hey, it's not that Bethlehem, it's this one. It's the one in Judah. So this is the point. They're quoting to him. This is what's going on. And he says in verse 7, then Herod secretly summoned the wise men, and he asked them the exact time that the star appeared. He sent them back to Bethlehem and said, go, search carefully for the child. When you find him, report back to me so that I too can go and worship him. Now you ask yourself the question, why would he want to know the exact time that the star appeared? Why is it important that Herod says, hey, tell me what time the stars appear, because I really want to go worship. We know he's not going to worship. He's going to try to kill him. But the reason it's important is because by the time the star rises, Herod is saying, that's when the child was born. I'm going to kill all the children in that general time frame. You with me? He's using it as when he's going to kill the children. So he's already planning the evil that he's doing. And then we get the beauty, which changes back. So we've gone from wise men to King Herod. Now we're going back to the wise men. Verse 9 to 11, look what it says. After hearing the king, they went on their way. And there was the star they had seen at its rising. And it led them until they came and stopped above the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overwhelmed with joy. So they head off on their way. Now I want you to think about the star. You may not also know this, but the star didn't give them GPS coordinates of where to go. They saw a star rise and they went to Jerusalem. But here we actually see the star begins to guide them. Look what it says. It led them until it came and stopped. Now I don't know about you. You read these scientific explanations. It was a supernova. It was 3 planets as they combined. It was a comet that passed by. You hear all these things. Maybe. I don't know about you, but how many comets shine all their way and then stop? This is miraculous. If you were there riding on a camel with a group of people watching a star guide you, what would you begin to do? Could you imagine your heart? Yeah. Could you imagine your heart just begin to thump? We're about to get there. And then it stops. You're following a star and it stops. And what is their reaction? Yeah, your reaction and their reaction are the same. When they saw it, they were overwhelmed with joy. That's the translation here. It literally says in Greek, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. Isn't that a weird statement? That's why it retranslates it here. How many of you talk that way? How was your birthday today, son? Well, I rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. You don't talk like that, do you? Why would a text like the Bible speak like that? Matthew is not really emotional. He tells matter-of-fact details. Why would he be telling you? He's screaming at you. They're overwhelmed. These guys are jumping off of their camels. They're so excited to go see. So you get this sense of joy. Now I want you to think with me. Pay attention to what the Bible's doing. Herod is disturbed. They're filled with joy. You following? They're excited. He's disturbed. And you begin to feel the feelings of each of the characters. In verse 11, we get entering the house. Where did the wise men come to? To the stable where the shepherds were? No. He came to the house. And what did they do? They saw the child with Mary, his mother. And falling to their knees, they worshiped him. you to pay close attention to a couple of details in here. The first, it says they saw the child with Mary, his mother. Why would that be important? Why would you include her in this? I mean, couldn't you have just skipped her out in this? I want you to know that when the gospel writers write, and this is very believed among scholars, when they write, quite often they footnote. You know what a footnote is? It's a reference. Quite often they footnote their stories by dropping names. You know who you can check to see whether this is true or not? Just go ask Mary. She'll tell you. She was there. You follow me? And part of the reason that we see this so clearly, and I'm just going to point it out. If you're a Catholic in the room today, I'm not picking on you. I want to point out what the Bible is teaching. That though they see Jesus with Mary, they don't worship Mary. Pay attention. Entering the house, falling on their knees, they worshiped Him, not them. And this is the story of baby Jesus. Who is capable of causing fear in the hearts of kings, invoking worship of men from afar, and He's done nothing other than be born. That's it. This is the story you're getting. And what did they do in their worship? It says, falling to their knees, they worshiped Him. Do you know the word for to fall to your knees and the word for worship in Greek is the same word? It means the same thing. But the point you need to grasp in the story is these guys are doing more than just paying homage to a king. This is like worship. This is pouring out their hearts. And lastly, what does it say they do? They open their treasures and they present Him with gifts. Gold, frankincense, and myrrh. I love the way the Bible says it here. They open their treasures. Did you know that no one can give a gift that doesn't belong to them? It really doesn't make a lot of sense. If I take someone else's gift and give it to you, I may feel good, right? My children like to do this with my money quite often. They take it and give it to someone else and feel good about it. But in reality, when you see the story in the Bible, it's quite often telling us your worship needs to be yours. And they open their treasures. And they give them. The significance of these three things has been discussed and debated. Why gold? Why frankincense? Why myrrh? Well, the simple answer is just they're all very valuable things, right? That's what you would give to a king. But they're also kind of strangely prophetic and symbolic. Gold is very much valued amongst kings, right? It's a showing the level of the person you're giving the gift to. It's the most valued treasure, right? Gold. Then it says they gave frankincense. That literally means frank incense. In the temple, they would consistently use something like frankincense. I want you to think about the temple in Israel. The temple in Israel is built, and there are these big doors, right? And the doors would shut, and on the inside there was a podium, something like this, and they would say prayers, and they would burn on this frankincense as a symbol of prayer. And this was something priests would do. Why? Why would you burn an incense on the inside? Because right outside those doors, they're killing animals and it smells like death. But in the presence of God, there's life. And this is the point. They're smelling. And so it's a priestly thing. So you've got this gold that's very valuable. And then you've got this priestly gift. And lastly, it's myrrh. Myrrh is known as being a very common spice used for a lot of things. We know the number one use for myrrh almost in the time of Jesus was to bury people. If you want to go visit a person that's died, you don't want them to smell, you bury them with myrrh. Just think about, they had no idea what they were doing, bringing Him these things. And that's what they do. And we get to see what God does. He says in verse 12, being warned in a dream not to go back to Herod. God tells them, don't go back, don't tell Herod. They return to their own country by another route. I want you to skip over that verse, verses 13 to 15. They have some good things to say, and I want you to just read verse 16. Then Herod, when he realized he had been outwitted by the wise men, he flew into a rage. Now, just a second ago, Herod is trying to trick the wise men into telling him where Jesus is. You catch that? Hey, I want you to go. I want you to find out where it is. You do the reconnaissance for me. Come, I'll worship Him. He's trying to trick them. But what happens when they don't show back up? He's angry. Can you believe they tried to trick me? And he's angry. And what does he do? He flies into a rage. Here we got another meaning of the mad king, angry. And he gave orders to massacre, that's the word it uses, all the boys in and around Bethlehem who were 2 years old and under, in keeping with the time he had learned from the wise men. So you want to know how old Jesus was? Who knows? But he's willing to guess as far as 2 years the star had appeared. Can you imagine? So here we see the story of the Magi and the Mad King. Men coming from far away to worship in response to a star that's appeared and a prophecy they've heard of. God guiding them along the way. And at the same moment, a king who's so terrified somebody's going to take his place as king that he's willing to massacre a village of children just to be able to save his kingdom. This is the story all surrounding Jesus, the baby king. And I want to just share with you 5 things you can take home with you from this story. You ready? Here we're going to get to the preachy time, okay? Number 1, Jesus' kingdom quite often scares the world. Jesus' kingdom quite often scares the world. And you know why it does it? Because Jesus refuses to let someone else be king. He's always going to be the king. And in your life, either Jesus is king or something else is there. And if Jesus begins to push at you and something else is ruling your heart, he begins to push at you because he will never be second place. He's always going to be king. And when he begins to push at you and you respond back with no, you're in the same category as a Herod. No one's going to take my place. I'm king here. Just think about that. This is what we quite often do. We look at the person over there and we judge them. Oh, can you believe they did that? All the while we would do the exact same thing given the same circumstance. This is humanity, right? This is why we need Jesus to come. So Jesus says he scares the kingdoms. And he not only scares them because of taking their place, but what does he do? He calls evil evil. He loves and cares for people. He doesn't treat people because of their race or because of their gender. He's not some sort of hater on people because they're not like us or not from my country or not this or not that. He scares people because he's humble. That's amazing, isn't it? And loving. Second thing is this. This may be the most important thing you hear from me today. If you've never heard this, let this sink deep into you. Number 2, you ready? All people are worshipers. All people. The question is, what or who are you worshiping? You were born a worshiper. And in this story, there are 3 people that come. Well, there's not 3. I just told you, right? But let's say we've got these guys that come bringing gifts with their whole group coming to worship. That's what they came to do, right? And you say to me, but we understand that. They go a long way. They do a lot of things. And they worship. Yeah, they're obviously worshipers. But we look at a whole other group of people and we say, those people aren't worshipers. I mean, that guy doesn't even believe in God. That's a secular person. That person's obsessed with this or that. They're not really worshipers, are they? Well, the Bible would tell us very clearly that all people are worshipers. I want you to just think about Herod. What is the thing that for Herod is the ultimate thing? The thing he loves with all his heart, with all his soul, with all his might, and with all his strength. What is it? It's his power. You see, his God is himself, but it's his power. And he's willing to worship. What does worship require? Worship requires you to do something. These men sacrificed, didn't they? They crossed 1,300 kilometers at least of wilderness and danger. They brought valuable gifts. Worship requires sacrifice. And what is Herod willing to kill in his sacrifice? Babies. Because he's worshiping. And all worship requires a sacrifice. So I'll give all the children of Bethlehem. That's my sacrifice. You follow me? If you are in this room today and you came here saying, I'm not a worshiper, I promise you, you are. Start to take a look at your life. Where does your time, where does your money, where does your heart, Where does your mind? You'll begin to discover really quick something has your heart. What is it? What is that thing? And this story is challenging us. What is it? Will you be like the wise men, or will you be like Herod? All people are worshipers. One famous pastor says it this way: human beings by their very nature are worshipers. Worship is not something we do. It defines who we are. You cannot divide human beings into those who worship and those who don't. Everybody worships. It's just a matter of what or whom we will serve. The third thing I want to share with you today is this. Not only is every person a worshiper, but worship requires sacrifice. Those go together. But worship always brings something out of the worshiper. It brings something out of the worshiper. In the case of the Magi, they are overwhelmed with joy. Let me ask you a question. When was the last time you were overwhelmed with heavenly joy? Is that a fair question? When is the last time you were overwhelmed with heavenly joy? I don't mean earthly joy because, man, that piece of chocolate was good. I'm not talking about that. Or I really enjoyed that movie, that was a great movie. I mean, when is the last time you were gripped by God? You see, worship precedes joy, and it's fulfilled with joy. It's both the thing that leads before it quite often, but more than often, many times, when we worship, the result is joy. It's peace, right? And this is what we see in the story of the wise men. They're led on, and worship is transforming them. The Apostle Paul says it this way: when we gaze upon the glory of Jesus, we're all being transformed from glory to glory. How are we doing that? Because as we see glory, we're transformed. What you stare at, you will become. What you focus on, you will become. And worship brings change. It brings something out of us. I hope today that even as I begin to speak, you begin to think in your heart, what is the thing? Am I like that? Am I like what Wyley's talking about today? Is there something? Because I'm not saying everything in our lives are bad. That would be incorrect. God gives us good things. He gives us things to enjoy. The problem is when a good thing becomes an ultimate thing. What is that thing in your life? The Apostle Paul is going to call that. That's how he shared the gospel with the people in his time. He didn't start off talking about Adam and Eve. Read the book of Romans. He doesn't start off saying, let me tell you the story of Adam and Eve. He starts off saying, all people are idolaters. They're worshipers of something created rather than the Creator. That's how he shares the gospel. So what did Jesus do for us? This baby born in a manger, what did he do for us whose hearts are constantly being tugged away? What did Jesus do? Well, let me tell you what he did. He didn't just come to be king over little Israel for a short amount of time. He came to seek out those who were idolatrous in their hearts, running the other direction from him. And he came to grab them. And with his love and his amazing embrace and his kindness, and he's saying, come to me, all you who are weary. He's calling to the idolaters. He's calling to your heart and mine. And as he goes to the cross, he makes the ultimate sacrifice. And he spreads out his arms, and he takes upon him all of your love for other things. He takes upon a heart that doesn't value God and doesn't see God. All the times you didn't love God, he's taking that on himself. So that as he's on the cross, he's justly being punished because he's carrying your and my sin. He's being punished. And God is saying, don't you see my justice? I'm punishing Jesus. And every nail that goes in, and every whip, and every beating, every stroke The punishment for sin is landing on him. The punishment for our worship of other things and our rebellion, it's landing on Jesus. So that God can say, don't you see in that same act, don't you see how much I love you? I love you in the cross of Jesus Christ. I love you. That's what he came to do. And he says that any person who would just turn away from their sins and just say, today, I turn away from those things. I trust in you. I'll never, by my good works, reach. Anyone who does that, he's willing to take. He will make you a son or a daughter. He'll transform your life. And if you're a Christian and you already believe this, he calls you back to it again. May he fill you. May the God of this passage fill you with joy that overwhelms you as you worship him. That's the goal of the gospel. Lastly, I'll make one point and then I'll finish, and that's this. You are a lot like the wise men. Your lifetime is like a 1,300 kilometer journey. It's like a lifetime trip. And all throughout your lifetime, you will be accumulating things. What do you do for Jesus? Because by the time you die, you will also be presenting gifts to this King, won't you? Will it be your prayers? Will it be your service? Will it be your gifts? Will it be your love? Will it be your life? What will you have to give to Jesus? You can't give him for your salvation. He paid for that already. But you can bring him gifts right out of the treasure box. A lifetime of service and love. Give him today what you can give him. That's what he calls from us. This is the story of the Magi and the Mad King. And Jesus wants us to see ourselves. Who are we? And are we willing to come to him and let him change us?